My most painful losses built the life that I'm living right now, that I feel so blessed to be living. And I wanted to share the gap, right? I wanted to share going from the painful losses to feeling like this is the most aligned that I'm feeling in my life in this season and how that came to be. Um, and while I'm going to talk about grief, I don't feel like this is a video about grief necessarily. Yes and no, because there's an element of joy and alignment and realization in this that I think that I know for myself I felt, and I think others of us feel it too and maybe haven't articulated it or found the words for it, because when you feel like you've had pain and loss, we can very easily sit in it. I can very easily sit in it. And I feel even blessed to be able to see the dots. That to me, in and of itself, is like worth the share, because I think in our lives, so often things happen and we don't know why. We can guess, we can have an idea, we can just surrender to the fact that it happened for a reason, but we don't really feel like, okay, solidly, I see the path here. And sometimes we do. And this is one of those times. So in 2021, my mother passed in June of 2021. And before that, I had never experienced grief. I had had grandmothers pass, my great grandmother pass, people that I had known, young people that I knew from high school, and I was sad and I felt really bad and I felt sympathy for their family. And yeah, I would even, I was moved to tears in certain instances. I was moved to shock in other instances, but I had never experienced grief until my mom passed. And I didn't realize that I had never really experienced grief until my mom passed. I feel like it's one of those things you don't know till you know. And that passing was a journey from February of 2021 to June of 2021. And I was there for it. I was there for all of it. And the first thing that I recognized, the first thing that I noticed was that I came thinking that grief looked a certain way. But I didn't know at the time that I thought grief looked a certain way. I didn't know that I had expectations around grief, but I did. I just assumed that grief meant that you're like, just in the dark, in a fetal position, in the bed, tear-soaked pillow, puffy eyes, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to be around anybody. And I'm not saying that there aren't elements to that when it comes to grief. And I'm not saying that I didn't have moments where I felt that way or that was my experience. But in my head, it was this continuous thread of dread and darkness until one day you started to come out of the darkness. And what I actually experienced was all of those things and laughter and joy and fun and good times. And initially I felt really strange and I felt kind of guilty because my siblings and I would be around my mom because she was at home hospice and we were there and we would be laughing and cutting up and having a good time. And this thing is happening right in front of us. And it almost felt like these two things should be in conflict, but they weren't. And I was like, this this feels okay because it's authentic to where we are right now, but it also feels wrong because I'm like, why are we laughing and we're going through this thing? And I also welcome community. People invited me to dinner, some of her friends, and I would go out to eat with them. And yeah, I had moments where I was triggered and I would just burst into tears. I had moments where I wanted to be left alone with my own thoughts and my own feelings and I didn't want to be bothered. For sure, I'm still triggered to this day. Years later, there's still things and I don't even know when the trigger's coming. It's like, surprise. And it could be something I watched on TV. It could be a t-shirt at the store that says like, grandma's my favorite, and I realized that my kids are not going to experience her in the way that I had hoped, I'm still triggered. And that realization that grief and joy could exist in the same moment, could exist simultaneously within me, was being, was happening in that moment. It was being revealed to me that that was possible, and that it was normal, whatever that means, and it was authentic. And it was authentic to how I was feeling in the moment. If I was feeling sad, I was feeling sad. If I wanted to cry, I would cry. If I was angry, I would be angry. If I was, feeling good in that moment and somebody made me laugh or something made me laugh and I was feeling joy, then I was feeling joy. It was authentic. And I was like, oh, so grief isn't what I thought it was. Okay. And that helped me throughout the whole process. And then it helped me after it too. So I think that's important to kind of understand that even at my big age, I didn't know till I knew. I hadn't experienced grief before. I had expectations that I didn't even know I had of what grief looked like or what it was supposed to look like. And then I also had my real experience with grief. And so that was 2021. And then in 2020, this is important. I know I'm rewinding the tape, but this is important. And it's important you knew what happened in 2021 first. Because in 2020, I had my second and latest miscarriage. And I was like 11, 12 weeks at that point where you think you're supposed to be out of the woods, that everything is supposed to be, okay, you're good to go. I was not. Another expectation or thought that kind of got burnt. I thought it was supposed to be, you thought like lit, like my Nana used to say. You might have to look that up because what that means, but it basically means like what you thought ain't it. And it wasn't, because I was like, oh, I'm out of the woods. I had told family members, I told my mom, and the next thing I know, no, it wasn't, I wasn't gonna have the second child that I wanted so much. Why this is significant, right? Because that loss happened before my mom, the year before. Almost a little under almost like a full year to her passing, but only a few months. Maybe that was in like September, October of 2020. And then December, January, February. So 4 months later is when my mom had the stroke, in February of 2021. So my mom was with me, comforting me through the loss of the pregnancy. And then everything happened in February. And so I was like, wow. Initially, it's just like, okay, when it rains, it pours, right? You ever have that feeling where you're like, okay, I'm done. I already had this thing. You can't then give me something else this close to this thing. I mean, you can, but in your head, you're like, you can't, because you don't feel like you can carry all of that. I'm like, I'm just physically healing and emotionally going through this thing over here. And now this, I was like, nah, this is too much. I can't do this. But there's this thing that I realized as I'm going through the process with my mother, because like I said, it was February and she didn't pass till June. And I was there for all of it, grieving a little bit along the way, which I also realized in hindsight. If I had been pregnant, if the pregnancy had kept going, I would not have been able to be there for my mom. When I say be there, I meant like, when I realized what happened, we threw some stuff in a bag. Us, myself, and our child drove to her house. Well, drove to the hospital, stayed at her house for like almost 6 months. I'm going back and forth. It was that time where like visitation was weird. one person, all of that, you had to go through certain protocol. We were still doing that. And I was, I realized that had I been very pregnant at that time, I would not have been able to be there in the way that I was. And she needed me to be there, and I needed to be there. I needed to be there for the process. And I was the only sibling with the flexibility that could really do that, and it wouldn't completely blow up my life. Yes, it did change the continuity of things. It did change how things things went with work a little bit. It took my daughter out of some spaces that she was in at the time, some homeschool co-ops, and it definitely changed the trajectory of my husband's job because his location specific. But I was the only sibling that could really do that for real. And I wouldn't have been able to do it. I was pregnant. If I was pregnant, I was like, okay, okay. That thread allowed me to find even deeper peace with what had happened with the pregnancy. Then my mom passes in June, and I go home. And in August of that year, so a couple of months later, I found out that I'm pregnant with my current son. I mean, if that's not divine, I don't know what is. When for me to have a later loss, thinking I'm out of the loss window, then to have these things happen with my mom and realize that had I not had that loss, I wouldn't have physically been able to do what I did and be there for my mom in the way that I was. And then once that had passed, I found out I was pregnant again. I said in the beginning of this that my most painful losses, those two in particular, the grieving of those two losses very close together, built the life that I have right now that I'm living. And the baby that I wanted, the second child that I wanted is one thread, right? One piece of that puzzle. The loss too, because the loss allowed me to grieve my mother slowly and with her and be there with her through that process. And I am immensely grateful that I was able to do that. I would have tried to do it anyway, pregnant and just figured out in her state, I would have figured it out. But it would have been different. And we were still dealing in that time period, right, where things were odd in the world and distance in the world. And so I found that to be a blessing in the allowance and the spaciousness for me to do that. And then for me to right after find out I was pregnant again with a healthy baby boy that just turned 4 in May. And with the passing of my mom, like a lot of times with family, there was inheritances and there was money and there were, and we got that. Her children were, I was the trustee of her estate. Her children got that. And with the money that she gave us, we were able to make certain moves and start to recover from that time where my husband wasn't working as much. And also, she left me her house in North Carolina. And I will admit that house got really difficult to rent out and to figure it out. And so we sold the house and we were able to buy a house where we were in Atlanta in cash. In 2020, one of the things that my husband and I wrote down that we wanted to do was to be able to buy a house in cash. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to do it. We just over here dreaming pipe dreams, but we might as well put it down because you never know. We may hit the lotto that we never play. You know what I'm saying? But it was like, just put it down, even if you don't know how and it seems crazy. And because of that, we were able to buy that house in cash. And we didn't have a mortgage and all of that. But in the course of being in the house for 3 years, which we're really grateful for, because neither he nor I had ever lived in a house. We're New York babies, New York raised kids. We were raised in apartments. We were raised in a concrete jungle. We had never lived in a house. And it was our first experience living in a house. So I think our inner children were like, okay, look at us in a house. Look at us in a backyard. You know what I'm saying? Well, that's not true. We lived in a house we rented right before we bought the house. But this is a house that we bought, that we owned. If you know, you know, air quotes. But this is a house that we bought, and it felt different. You know, like this is our yard and this is our front yard and our backyard, and we can kind of do what we want to do, and we can make changes, and we can mold it into what it is that we wanted. And we really cherished and enjoyed that time, and seeing our kids run around. We have a lot of great memories in that house. My son calls it the blue house because it was kind of painted blue on the outside, like a slate kind of blue. And but 3 years in, we realized that we had another dream, that there was something else that we wanted to do with our life that felt more aligned with who we were and who we are. And that was to travel and move abroad. And so we sold that house and most of our things, and some things are in storage, but most of our things. And we live this life where we now travel abroad and explore different countries and different cultures, and push ourselves to learn different languages and move ourselves out of our own comfort zones, and watch our children have experiences that we did not have, okay, as children, so that we're like able to give that to them. And the things that they get to experience are simple, but they're also really expansive and really abundant and really beautiful. And this is the life that we live now. But my mom left the house that we sold to then buy a house and have a house experience. And I think specifically for my husband, he had to feel like he wanted to buy a house and experience that a little more than I did, but I was down. And we did it. And it was beautiful. And what we've built now is beautiful. But to be able to sell that house and sell our things and move into, and not be anchored to certain things that we didn't want to be anchored to, and move in the way that felt maybe crazy to some, but correct and right and aligned for us, that's our life now. That's the life that we've built now. Like, what country do we want to go to? You know, where do we want to go to next? Let's plan that out. That's the conversations we're having. But all of this, when I look at that thread, was born from the losses, from the miscarriage in 2020, that I thought was the most painful thing. And then a few months later, having something even more deeply painful happen to me and experiencing that grief for the first time, to then recognizing that had I not had the miscarriage, that I would not have been able to be there for my mom in the way that I was. And then for her to pass and then leave me her house. And then us to be able to leverage that house, not once to buy a house and have that experience, but twice to also continue to invest and use it cyclically to build this life that I feel she would be really proud of and amazed by. She loved to travel. She used to work for Delta Airlines back in the day, and she used to travel. And see her grandkids be able to travel and experience different cultures and experience different things. She would have been out here, you know, with us. She would have been here for it. That's that. All of those things allowed this to happen. I feel like each thing was divinely placed. Each, you know, and I forgot, like, and also having my son, the second baby that I wanted to have, right after, finding out right after she had passed that I was pregnant with Zen. Like I said in the beginning, my most painful losses built the life that I'm living right now that I'm grateful for. Step by step, motion by motion. And when you're in it, you don't see it, you don't know exactly where things are going to go. And then once you're out of it and you look back, you're like, oh, snap. So sometimes when we're in the thick of our pain, when we're in the thick of loss, or in the thick of grief, we have no idea what is on the other side of what feels like darkness. what feels like despair. But the truth is, there's always something on the other side. There's something there. And every day that we get up, and every day we make the choice to be grateful, and every day that we make the choice to pour something into ourselves, to choose joy, to choose laughter, to choose a smile when we can in the midst of the thing, it's moving us forward and toward something. So yeah, I don't know who needs to hear this. I don't know who the son that I was just talking about came on in from his nap on some zombie like, my eyes are still half closed, mommy, and I just want to be up underneath you. But daddy had to take him for a second. So I could just finish up with you because I'm just wrapping up anyway. But yeah, I don't know who needs to hear this. I hope that it lands with someone in a way that really resonates, because when I was just thinking about it in a retrospect, it really helps to ground me. So, hey, thank you so much for chatting with me, for hanging with me a little bit. I appreciate you. I am Imani, and I make videos to remind us and encourage us to stay connected to yourself, connected to your partner, and connected to creating a life that feels good to you, because we only get the one. So if that's your vibe, please subscribe, and I'm going to see you in the next video. When I wake up in the morning, love, and the sunlight hurts my eyes, and something without warning, love, bears heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day.